Hello everybody, my name is Chris Brady, author of the Boeing 737 Tech Guide and the Boeing 737 Tech Site. And in this video I'll be taking you through the preliminary report issued today by the NTSB into the accident to flight Alaska Airlines 1282. Contents very briefly here, what happened, how it happened, and then a quick look through some of the other technical aspects that have been raised. As always, please treat your company training and their manuals as the authoritative source of information. So in this video I'm going to try and contain my content to that of the NTSB preliminary report itself. I'm not going to go over again the various mid-exit door options or construction or what have you, as I've covered that quite extensively in other videos, which if you wish to read up on it again are still available on my channel. So what is a preliminary report? It's an early heads up into what the final report may contain. A full final investigation report can take up to 18 months to produce. That's what the NTSB said in one of their press briefings for this event. Typically they take around about a year. That's the target under ICAO Annex 13. However, under Annex 13, states in charge of an investigation must submit a preliminary report to ICAO within 30 days of the date of the accident, unless the accident or incident data report has been sent by that time, which would be highly unusual to have an event of this magnitude investigated within 30 days. So it's this preliminary report which was issued 6th of January 2024 by the NTSB, which we'll be covering here. Now, important side note is that the information in a preliminary report is, by definition, preliminary, and it's therefore subject to change depending what unfolds in the investigation over the coming months. So, what happened? First of all, we now have the timeline from the flight data recorder. I've included the main points here. I've edited a few out, things like heading changes and the like. So we know that the aircraft took off 6 minutes past 5 Pacific Standard Time from PDX. Then when the aircraft was passing 14,830 feet at 270 knots, the cabin pressure dropped suddenly from approximately 14 to approximately 12 psi, and the cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning activated. So we just know at that stage it was more than 10,000 feet. Of significance, the diff pressure was at 5.7 psi at that altitude, and it rapidly decreased to zero over the next few seconds. So 1 second on from the event, the cabin pressure dropped to 9 psi, with the aircraft still at 14,850 feet. 1 minute and 8 seconds later, the aircraft had continued to climb but reached its maximum altitude of 16,320 feet before beginning to descend. Airspeed still around about the 270 knot mark. A minute 23 after the event, the select altitude was wound down to 10,000 feet. 4.5 minutes after, the aircraft had descended below 10,000 feet, and 5.5 minutes after the event, the altitude was about 9,000 feet, 270 knots, and the cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning had deactivated. And just over 14 minutes after the event, the aircraft landed safely back on runway 28. Unfortunately, the CVR data was overwritten, as the CVR circuit breaker was not pulled after flight. Now, I wouldn't read anything too sinister into that. You have to remember that the crew had experienced possibly the most significant flying event of their career, and it is not unusual really is not unusual for crew to forget to pull the CVR circuit breaker. They probably forgot to pull the FDR circuit breakers as well, but they're on a much longer recording. I think that this was a 25-hour recording time, so obviously all that data was still intact. So shame that the CVR data wasn't preserved, but really I don't think it was that sort of event where the CVR data will have any bearing at all on the final outcome. But it's just a reminder to crew, all of us, I include myself in this, in the event of a significant event, get that circuit breaker pulled. Okay, so as I said, the two things that jumped out at me were the very fast rate that the diff pressure dropped. I mean, a few seconds. So that is a significant, rapid depressurization event. I mean, really couldn't be any more rapid than that. So the physiological effects on the passengers and the crew will have been significant, and the startle factor again significant. What I want to also say was again, this 1 minute and 8 seconds before the aircraft started to descend, I've seen on the out there on the internet, a few armchair warriors criticizing the crew about this. I feel that is really rather unjustified. Certainly at this stage, with what we know. I'm sure more details will come out, but again, you have to remember what happened in that 1 minute 8 seconds. I think it's remarkably good that they did manage to turn it round in that time. If I just take you through to the sort of NTSB summary, and this we pulled together from the crew reports. So. The captain said that while climbing through about 16,000 feet, there was a loud bang, and the flight crew said their ears popped. Of course they would. And the captain said his head was pushed up into the head-up display. That'll be the collimator just above where the captain sits. And his headset was pushed off as well, nearly falling off his head. The FO said her headset was completely removed due to the rapid outflow of air from the flight deck. Both crew said they immediately donned their oxygen masks, and they added that the flight deck door was blown open, and it was very noisy and difficult to communicate. The flight crew immediately contacted ATC, declared an emergency, requested lower altitude, and the flight was assigned 10,000 feet. The captain said he then requested the rapid decompression checklist, and the FO executed it from the QRH. Now, trust me, there would be a hell of a lot going on there. So 1 minute 8 seconds to initiate a descent with all that going on, I don't think there's any need to criticise the crew for that. Okay, onto the damage and what the NTSB found. So damage to the passenger cabin was remarkably little, other than the loss of the door and the sidewall panelling associated with it. What I did find surprising was the damage to these two seats right next to where the plug departed, so 25A and 26A, and they were both rotated towards where the plug had been, one by 10 to 20 degrees. Which I found surprising when I read the report this morning, but that's the power of the air pressure there, and again, thank goodness 26A and B were unoccupied seats. There was also some deformation of the door frame of the forward lav. That will be due to the change in air pressure just pulling that door towards the aperture, and buckling and displacement of the sidewall panels and trim throughout the aircraft, which again could have been from the initial depressurization or from the subsequent airflow into the aircraft from the hole where the plug was. There were no indications of any other failures or malfunction of the aircraft or any of its systems, which is good to know. So this photo here is of the recovered door plug. It was mostly intact with some damage from the event, and appeared to be manufactured in accordance with the engineering drawings. So that gives the door, a clean bill of health as regards, any manufacturing defects to it. What the NTSB have said, that all 4 securing bolts, and there are 2 vertical movement arrestor bolts on the hinges, 2 upper guide track bolts, and the forward lower hinge guide fitting and forward lift assist spring, which I've highlighted in the red box, were missing and have not been recovered. Well, obviously the spring and the lower hinge guide fitting, could be anywhere. The bolts, as I'm sure you all suspect, might be a little more difficult to find. Right, just a little recap on stop fittings, because the subsequent slides we're going to look at what the NTSB found on those stop fittings. So just to remind you that there are 12 stop pins which are marked around the door plug, 12 stop pads around the frame, and that's 6 on each of the forward and aft edges. These stop fittings are to transfer the pressure load from the door plug to the door frame. So when the aircraft's unpressurized, the guide tracks and pins hold the door plug closed, and there's actually a slight gap between the pins and the pads. But when the aircraft pressurizes, that pushes the door outboard, causing the pins on the plug to touch the pads on the frame, and that's what takes those pressure loads and keeps the door in place in flight. This and the little animation shows how the pins pass over and past the pads and then down slightly outboard to engage with them when the plug is closed. So obviously normally it's in the closed position and the pins are against the pads, but when the door opens, the way it opens is that those pins are lifted upwards away from the pads, and then the door can move outboard. So this is what the NTSB found on the incident aircraft, and you can see that there's damage at the upper forward stop location, and this is representative of other stop locations, they say. So this contact damage was noted on the lower sides of all 12 stop fittings and pins and fittings on the plug and the pads. Overall, they said that the damage was consistent with the MED plug translating upwards and outboard and aft during the separation. So this is not a clean separation of the pin and the pad as per design when the door is intentionally when the plug is intentionally opened. There should be more vertical movement. There hasn't been here, which certainly suggests that the pins and the pads were just hanging on to each other for some while before they're finally giving way. So again, a reminder of how it should look. These the upper guide tracks and locking bolts. So you've got 2 guide rollers on the frame which slot into 2 guide tracks on the upper forward and aft edges of the mid-exit door plug. These hold the door in place at the top, and there are locking bolts which go through the track there. They've got a castellated nut and a cotter pin on them to prevent them from escaping. These bolts and 2 similar ones at the bottom of the door plug, which I'll come on to show next, stop any vertical movement of the door which could cause the stop pins and pads to disengage, allowing the differential pressure to open the door. So it's all in these locking bolts really. To stop any vertical movement which could allow the pins and pads to disengage and thereby allowing the door to escape. This is what was found by the NTSB. Both upper guide fittings installed on the forward and aft sides of the mid-exit door plug respectively were fractured vertically through the inboard wall of the track, which you can see clearly in that photo there. Examination revealed features consistent with overstress fracture and no evidence of pre-existing cracks or damage. The outboard upper guide track bolt holes were intact and exhibited no deformation, and you can see in the red rectangle on the photo there, that is where the bolt would have been. And you can see quite clearly how that guide track has been basically ripped open by the presumably the guide pin, just dragging its way through that guide track as the door left. And remember, these guide tracks are not there to hold the door in place against air pressure. That's the job of the stop pins and pads. These are just there to hold the door on the ground with zero pressure differential between the inside and the outside. Now this shows a photo of one of the boreholes, and what you can see here is that the paint in it is intact and has shown no evidence of heavy contact damage. This in the upper guide track, and it's a representative one from the incident aircraft. But I say, reading the report, that they were all like this. There were some light circular witness marks around the boreholes, consistent with the presence of a washer, in their words, at some time. So not necessarily at the time of the incident, but I think what they're alluding to is that they were there when the aircraft left Wichita. Okay, so the lower locking bolts, we've mentioned the upper ones so far. Again, just a reminder, this the photo on the right here is what it should look like. So you've got two vertical movement arrestor bolts on the hinges at the bottom of the mid-exit door plugs. As the name suggests, they prevent the springs from moving the door plug up the hinge guides. They've also got a castellated nut and a cotter pin through it to prevent them from escaping, and these bolts, just like the two at the top of the mid-exit door plug, are there to stop any vertical movement of the door which could cause the stop pins and pads to disengage, allowing differential pressure to open the door. So all four bolts, the two at the bottom and the two at the top, are there for the same purpose. Now, this is what the NTSB found. So looking first at the forward of the two fittings, and again, on just to explain on this photo, they're actually reversed, just the way the NTSB laid it out in the photo against the view of the outside of the aircraft. So the bottom photo, you're kind of looking from the inside out, whereas on the upper photo you're looking from the outside in, which is why the forward one is on the left at the top photo and the right at the bottom photo. Anywho, we know which one we're talking about. It's that hinge guide fitting fractured from the door plug and separated from the forward hinge fitting. The forward hinge fitting shaft was bent inboard about half a degree, with corresponding contact damage noted to the plug lower beam. The vertical movement arrestor bolt hole bore in the forward hinge fitting was intact and undamaged. And again, the fact that it was intact and undamaged, whereas there was damage to other parts, again, sort of suggests that there may not have been a bolt there. Looking now at the aft lower fitting, this fractured from the plug during the event, but remained attached to the hinge fitting, as you can see in the photo, the upper photo there. It was bent inboard about 3.7 degrees, so that's significantly more than the forward fitting, with corresponding contact damage noted to the plug lower beam. The contact damage was noted on the inboard side of the hinge fitting shaft, intersecting with the vertical movement arrestor bolt hole, consistent with contact with the plug. But the bore hole was otherwise undamaged. Again, if the bore hole's undamaged, this is suggesting that the bolts weren't there. The outboard side of the vertical movement arrestor bolt hole was slightly elongated and exhibited small tensile cracks at the apex of the bend, consistent with plastic deformation of the hinge fitting shaft. The bore hole was otherwise undamaged. Okay, so this is the attachment flange which sits on the previous component you saw in the previous photo. This was fractured at the two upper attach hole locations, and the bolts remain installed in the door plug. The two lower attach bolts were fractured. And a similar damage pattern was noted on the door plug at the forward lower hinge guide fitting attachment location. All features were consistent with ductile overstress fracture. Again, what's significant, if you look at where it's circled in red, that's where the vertical movement arrestor bolt hole. That is the vertical movement arrestor bolt hole. So that's where the bolt would have been had it have been fitted. Yet that again is intact and undamaged, which again suggests that there was no bolt there. So the NTSB summary of all this, what they said was, overall the observed damage patterns and absence of contact damage or deformation around holes associated with the vertical movement arrestor bolts and upper guide track bolts in the upper guide fittings, hinge fittings and recovered aft lower hinge guide fitting indicate that the four bolts that prevent upward movement of the mid-exit door plug were missing before the door plug moved upwards and off the stop pads. I think that's something that we've probably all suspected as the pictures built up over the last month, but this is confirmation by the NTSB that everything they've found so far suggests that these four locking bolts were in fact missing. Okay, so how did this happen? Let's start by looking at the journey of the aircraft and those bolts. So the fuselage, complete with mid-exit door plugs and locking bolts installed, are assembled by Spirit Aerosystems at Wichita before being transported to Boeing in Seattle by train, as per the photo. Now I'm told by several sources in Seattle that the mid-exit door plugs are not normally or routinely opened on arrival at any stage during the fuselage life at Seattle. They can be reopened if necessary, but that is not normally done. So it's on a kind of need to do it basis. So the particular fuselage from Alaska Airlines 1282 arrived at Seattle on the 31st of August 2023. The following day it was inspected, and a non-conformance record, that is an NCR, was created, noting 5 damaged rivets on the edge frame forward of the left mid-exit door plug, and they're marked there in that photo. Documents and photos show that to perform the replacement of the damaged rivets, access to them required opening the left mid-exit door plug. And to open that plug, the two vertical movement arrestor bolts and the 2 upper guide track bolts have to be removed, which makes sense. You need to open the door to replace the rivets. To do that, you've got to remove the 4 locking bolts. Now, the 5 rivets were replaced some 18 days later on the 19th of September. And this image from the NTSB via Boeing was attached to a text message between Boeing team members on that date, apparently around 1839 local. Now, these Boeing personnel were discussing interior restoration after the rivet rework was completed during second shift operations on that day. Of significance, or of note certainly, is that the photo shows this left door plug, the one that departed the flight immediately before interior restoration, and the circles show 3 locations, and it's only 3 because the 4th isn't visible because of the insulation. 3 locations without the retaining bolts having been replaced. So again, this kind of builds up the weight of evidence that it is entirely possible that the bolts were never reinstalled. Now, there's been speculation on all kinds of things, but one was that the mid-exit door plug was open to replace a damaged seal. The NTSB preliminary report does address this. It says that during the build process, 1 quality notification was noted indicating that the seal flushness was out of tolerance by 1/100th of an inch. No engineering rework was required, as Spirit Aerosystems engineering determined that the condition was structurally and functionally acceptable and did not adversely affect the form, fit or function of the installation. So I think the opening the door for the seals was probably a red herring, but obviously we know they needed to be open to redo the rivets, so it's kind of academic. What struck me when I read this was that there's a lot of talk about quality control at Boeing and or Spirit Aerosystems, and indeed, 5 rivets were found to have needed reworking. But I would have to say that if an inspection highlights a seal flushness being out of tolerance by 1/100th of an inch, I think there are certainly some quite robust inspection procedures or inspections taking place. The procedures certainly seem to be what could have caused this, but the actual inspections seem to be quite tight. But anyway, we will find out over the next 18 months. So the paper trail continues. The investigation continues to determine what manufacturing documents were used to authorise the opening and closing of this plug during the rivet rework. And I would expect this would be addressed in the final report. I mean, yeah, it will be addressed in the final report if it hasn't come out earlier. Okay, so let's just briefly, in the last couple of minutes, have a look at other technical aspects which have been discussed and raised. So let's see what the NTSB has to say about those. First of all, the Wi-Fi installation. Now, it's known that after taking delivery of the aircraft, Alaska Airlines sent the aircraft to AAR in Oklahoma for Wi-Fi and PCS antenna installation. Now, AAR have told the NTSB that they've modified approximately 60 Alaska Airlines 737-9s and with the Wi-Fi and PCS antenna, and have not on any of those aircraft had to remove or open any MED plugs for this work, including the event airplane. The NTSB has done a complete records review from the time the event aircraft left the Boeing factory to the time of the incident, and found no evidence that the left plug was opened after leaving Boeing's facility, and that includes both by AAR or by Alaska Airlines themselves. So it would appear that nobody has opened the plug after it left Boeing. And again, those keyboard warriors on the internet are saying we can see a set of steps going up to that door plug in this aerial photo or in other aerial photos. That's not the case. It just so happens that where the cover is that you can see on the crown of the fuselage is the location of the Wi-Fi PCS antenna, which is in a similar location to where the door plug is. That does not mean that the door plug was opened, and indeed what the NTSB has found is that the door plug was not opened. So that's one issue addressed. The other issue is that of the pressurization failures. Now the NTSB have said just today in the preliminary report that a post-accident review of cabin pressure and cabin altitude data before the decompression event showed that the cabin pressure control system had functioned per design with no cabin altitude or cabin rate exceedances. However, the NTSB's examination of the aircraft tech logs and maintenance logs has identified entries indicating that a pressure controller light had illuminated on 3 previous flights, which we knew. My comment on that is that this suggests that at this stage of the investigation, the pressurization controller issues were not a precursor to the event. Again, there was talk that if the door had been loose, there would be it could air pressure could leak through it, and this could cause the auto fail on the pressurization system. Certainly, from what the NTSB have written here, I would say that is not a likely scenario. But again, this is just preliminary report data, so other things could come to light. And the flight deck door. And again, I know several of you are pointing out that this is not the flight deck door used on that aircraft. I know I've deliberately used an old flight deck door photo just for security reasons, because we're talking about a flight deck door here. We know that the whole door, not just the decompression blowout panels, opened as a result of the depressurization. And we know that this was an undocumented feature in in both the FCOMs and the maintenance manual. So on 15th of January, so about a week after the event, Boeing issued this FCOM bulletin for the MAX that says, in the event of a passenger cabin decompression, the entire flight deck door may open, permitting flight deck air to vent into the passenger cabin. And the extract, or the relevant extract, is I've reproduced there below. So this particular one's for the MAX, but I'm sure that the FCOM bulletin is also applicable for all other series of 737. And lastly, door warnings. Again, it's a lot of questions have been asked. Would the flight crew have got a door warning? No, they wouldn't, because they're disabled. Again, I'm not quite sure whether the proximity sensors have been removed or not. I thought they had. Somebody has written to me saying that they're actually still present. But either way, they're not. They will no longer bring on the usual lights for if either mid-exit door were to be open or indeed not fully closed. This wasn't mentioned at all in the NTSB preliminary report, but obviously I personally feel that this could perhaps have been a a precursor to the event. One of the issues here is that when the plug option is taken by an airline, it's very difficult. Well, it's impossible to see anything of the door from inside the cabin. So you're really reliant on spotting anything, the door becoming loose, shall I say, or not being seated properly from the outside. I personally feel that if these lights had been active, then it is possible that there could have been some early warning of the door going, which if it was happening, in the run up to the event, and I'm talking days, if not weeks before, then that could have caused some maintenance action, inspection of the door, which may have helped. But we don't know. I mean, that is actually just speculation on my part, which I'm not normally drawn to do. But I have a feeling that this point may be expanded upon in the final report. So that's it from me. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and thank you all for watching.